You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box. We are here to answer your tough questions, so ask away. Today we have with us Blake Adams. Blake, welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Blake is new to the podcast, but not new to the podcast. Blake actually does all of our social media for the podcast, and he is a therapist at Therapy Utah. So we're really happy to have you.
Yeah, it's fun to be on this side of production.
Right? Yeah, it's awesome. So Blake, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a therapist at Therapy Utah. I'm a CSW. Primarily, I work with addictions, men's mental health, depression, and I'd say anxiety is probably the thing I specialize in the most.
Okay.
I have a background in the military, but I've always been really interested in mental health and therapy. So it just kind of just gravitated towards this field, and I absolutely love it.
Nice. That's awesome. Very cool. Blake, you are an asset at Therapy Utah. I'm happy to have you with us talking about this really important topic. This is a hard-hitting one, and I think it's one that parents are dealing with, or if they haven't, they probably will. And so we'll just get right into the question. It's a hard one. Mm-hmm. It's, what do I do if I find out my child is looking at pornography? So really simple,
yes,
straight to the point, and when I say simple, I mean it's direct, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just start unpacking this, because it's not just about that their screens or filters. There's obviously a lot that goes on when a child has stumbled upon pornography or is looking at pornography. So let's just start with a very basic. How common is it for kids or teens to access porn?
I mean, access it, very common. Okay. I've seen so many different stats out there, different numbers, but most of them, I would say, concur that the majority of teens have at least seen porn. Mm-hmm. And I would say, a lot of them are actively watching porn, right? Especially when you go into your male teens. But that's not to say that male and female don't view it, right? So it's an issue that crosses genders.
Okay, good. So if you're a parent and you find this out, right? And I know you've had this in your office before. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to a parent right out of the gates? Okay, you find this is happening, or they've stumbled upon it. What's the first thing you would tell them?
Take a breath. Take that deep breath and kind of check in with yourself. Where are you at?
Totally.
Because this is something, it's not just happening to you, right? This happens. It's really common, right? It's as much as we wish that it wasn't just this common, super accessible thing. It happens all the time, right? And so we kind of have to take it as such, just take it in stride.
Gosh, but when you say that, I think it is so hard, because it feels, I would imagine, so scary for a parent mm-hmm. to know that this is happening, because it feels so threatening, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is just take a moment to regulate yourself before kind of panicking.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing.
Regulate yourself and really create that separation, between the emotions that are coming up for you. Where's that feeling in your gut, that tightness in your chest, right? Separate that from your child, right? Because chances are your child, if you imagine, they're probably feeling a lot of those feelings too, but it's even going to be more confusing for them because this is even newer to them, right?
Totally.
And it's scary. And so what we got to do is recognize, okay, where's that fear coming from, right? Is that fear because my child is a scary person, right? And he or she is bad and doing bad things? Or is it coming from somewhere else, right? And we make that distinction between where that's coming from in the child, and you're going to be set up for a much better conversation.
But what if the parent is really scared? Like, what if the truth is they are scared, right? I would imagine that is a very typical feeling, like to be really scared. But what you're saying is just separate that fear from the child.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Well, I'll talk about, so a lot of the time, when parents do find this out, they'll be like, well, let's set up a therapy appointment. Let's get them in, meet with a therapist. I think that's a great thing, especially if your therapist is someone who has a good understanding of how to work with it, right? Yeah. And help the child. But oftentimes when I get a kid that's been viewing pornography, the parents bring them in. they never want to be there, right? Because that's like,
yeah,
you don't
they're
want
in
to
trouble.
go.
That's why they're there, right? We got to fix you.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
It's like I'm broken. There's something wrong with me, right? So first thing I'll do, oftentimes, is I just draw this chart on the board, right? And it's 0 to 100, 0 being, fine, good, 100 being absolutely worst, most horrible thing possible, right? And we just start. I'm like, okay, where would you put holding hands? Okay, a lot of people are like, I don't know, maybe it's a 5, maybe it's a 40, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen that. You kind of go, okay, kissing, all right? It's a little higher, making out.
So you're doing 0 is like what you think's acceptable. 100 is what you don't think is acceptable.
Yep.
Is that what we're talking about?
What is bad? I keep it really simple terms, right? What is the worst thing possible?
In terms of like sexual relationships or just intimate relationships?
Just anything really, yeah. Okay. We kind of just, there's a scale of what is okay and what is horrible, right? We just keep it at that simple
With
level.
Relationships though, or are you doing it in general? Okay.
General.
Anything. Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yep. And we work our way up and we go to making out. Okay, making out, that might be a 70, right? Like some touching, like genital regions. That's getting higher. Okay. We talk about, we'll throw pornography out there. Oftentimes, sometimes we see 75. A lot of the time I'm seeing it at 99 to 100.
Wow.
Right. And then I ask premarital sex. Same place, 99 to 100. Okay. And then I throw out rape, murder, genocide, right? And oftentimes there's this kind of like moment where that client kind of has a pause and it's like, well, I don't really have anywhere else to go with that. I can't go any higher, right? And even worse off is you have instances where there's not wheels turning, right? Where, and this really does happen as an adult, you might be like, no way. But there are instances where, that client, that child is like not making a distinction between viewing pornography and something is like murder or rape. And to me as a therapist, like it's eye-opening, but it's also heartbreaking to see that.
Does that change their response when you say murder or rape next to pornography? Does that change where they maybe put it on the scale?
Oftentimes we'll kind of go back and reevaluate and they will change it. Yes.
Yeah.
Those are usually for me, that's very optimistic if they can make that distinction.
But also really eye-opening to realize how problematic these children that come into the office often feel it is. Like they feel like it is as bad as it could be, right?
They feel like they're a murderer, right? And that's the level we're working at. So kind of to bring this full circle is a parent recognizing, okay, if I feel bad, my child's also going to feel a lot of confusion and a lot of guilt around this, right?
I think that is what is so confusing about pornography is your mind knows it's bad, but somehow what does it do? The body says, oh, wait a minute, this is great. So it's this very confusing things, right? For kids to go through. And I think trying to understand that, like, wait a minute, this is actually meant to try to get you, like your body is responding. That's actually what it's meant to do. You're not crazy. This is actually exactly what it's meant to do. But here's the problem, right? Trying to help educate them because I'm sure, like you said, it is very confusing.
Oh yeah, it's scary. I always say, like, when you're going to a conversation like this as a parent, don't treat it like the Super Bowl, right?
Meaning what?
This is not, the deciding factor that determines everything. It's if we mess this up, it's not the end of the world, right? Because if you treat it that way for you, it's going to be really terrifying. It's like, what if you make a mistake? What if I say something wrong, right? What could happen for my child, right? If we go into it with the Super Bowl mentality, we put all this like weight and gravity on it. Child's going to feel that too. And what we're gonna do in that conversation, just like if you were playing football and you came into a game feeling unprepared and terrified, we're gonna fail or we're gonna mess up, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't need to be the Super Bowl. No one ever said it had to be. Let's just make this a practice game. If you're confused about it, if you have questions, you can go into that conversation, tell your child, hey, like this is kind of scary and confusing for me too, right? And so I want to work with you, work through it and figure out what we can do to help.
Nice. I like that. And what I think about too is the Super Bowl only comes around once, maybe in a lifetime or a few times, right? For a football player. But the idea is that we have this conversation, like it's an ongoing conversation. It's just not a one and done. I would imagine continuing to have a dialogue about pornography, especially once you've known it's been viewed, would be really beneficial.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's kind of how, whether if you want to call it recovery, improvement, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a day-by-day process, right? So let's not treat it like it's a one-time thing, like we're going to have this conversation and either everything's going to be fixed or it's not, because that's just not how anything works.
Yeah. 100%. Here's the thing I wonder. We as parents, you go ready to have that conversation. How are you going to get a kid to open up? I mean, the kid feels bad. They don't want to talk about it. They're embarrassed, right? They're maybe in trouble. What does that conversation look like?
Just kind of as I mentioned, but going into that, just being honest about it, right? Mm-hmm. Get in touch with those feelings that you're having. I think in any kind of communication, oftentimes we try to logic our way through it, to try to say the right thing. There's not really a prescribed method, but I will say the best way to do it is to lead with, hey, check in with your body, right? Identify those emotions. Hey, just even starting this conversation, like my chest is a little bit like tight right now. Mm-hmm. This is kind of scary for me to have this conversation. And I want to make sure that we're doing this together, right? That we're a team. Yes. Because it's a scary thing. Let's tackle this together. All of a sudden that child becomes a teammate, right? A player on that team and not an accused criminal, right? Not a convict.
I love that. And you know what I love? The truth is, as a parent, you're afraid too. Mm-hmm. And you just acknowledging that, like, I'm trying to figure this out too. I know it's scary and I'm here with you. So again, we're teammates. We're not, you're the worst and shaming, but it's like, we're going to figure this out together. I would imagine that would allow a child to be a lot more open. Dr. Lisa D'Amour, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she always says having conversations in the car is really beneficial. And I found this with my teenagers.
I love that.
Because we're not looking at each other, but it feels a lot less threatening. And so having, choosing when to have the conversation, where to have the conversation, I would imagine is also really valuable.
Oh yeah. Well, there's actually research done, especially with males. If you're having conversation, sitting side by side is actually much more comfortable and effective, right? Than sitting face to face and trying to have that conversation, because that feels like spotlights are on, right? But if you're side by side, maybe you take mini golfing, mm-hmm. do a task, do something that you're doing together, and then talk. That becomes so much more natural.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now we know that we want to have that conversation. We know that we're going to work on regulating ourselves, but we also need to consider, okay, what do we do? Now what do we do? Now do we shut everything down? Do we take the devices? Like, what is the actual, what do you tell parents to do at this point?
I think that is a great question. It's also a difficult one because there's a fine balance of, let's restrict all the freedoms and make this person feel like they're in a prison, right? We don't want a child to feel like they're in a prison. But also understanding that, hey, maybe this isn't a super healthy thing for you to have, 24/7 access to, the internet and be able to look at, pornography, which does have, there's a lot of questions and how healthy that is, right? Where that aligns with morals. So it's going to be different case by case. But I would say whatever route you take, do it as a team, right? Because if you do not have your child on your team, right? If you are the judge and jury in that situation, and they're probably going to try to get around those regulations. Yeah. And they're going to succeed most often.
Right. I think helping our children know that we're on their team is really important. I was having a conversation with my teenager last week, and I said to him, hey, I am on your team. I am Team Brit all day long. And honestly, it was interesting because the dynamic changed a little bit. It was like, oh, really? You're not against me. And I think sometimes it can feel that way. It's you versus me versus no, actually, I'm with you. I'm on your team. I'm all day on your team. That reminder feels very different. Like, let's do this together. If this is something that we know is a problem, let's do it together. Let's figure out together what this can look like. I love that idea. And I think also helping a teen understand why. Like, why is it problematic? And when you are thinking about talking to a child or a teenager about why it's problematic, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So I think that is... It's a tough question because it's going to vary person to person, right?
Okay.
Because there, of course, is that moral, maybe there's a religious aspect of it. So, of course, you're trying to align that to someone's, moral perspective.
Right.
But beyond that, just understanding that, within pornography itself, there are a lot of things that are potentially harmful, right? You get in and you're seeing... these things acted out, like sexual acts. And if this is only information you're getting about those things, maybe you're seeing violence, right? A really violent approach to sex. And that's what you know about sex. Unrealistic things, right? And so there's always that risk of viewing sex as this, very unrealistic, out of touch act. But then objectifying the people within, the pornography, and how does that translate to your relationships outside, right?
Absolutely. All of that, I think is helpful to really just talk about why it's not okay, right? And again, what I said earlier, I think it's so important to remember, like, it's confusing because in their mind they know it's not okay, but it turns them on. There's something exciting about it. So it feels very confusing, right? And, I do think as you were talking, I thought, there's violence when you see it acted out that way, but also there's an addictive quality to it, right? And anything that becomes an addiction can definitely become problematic.
Yeah.
And I wonder about this, Blake. Do you ever talk to them about what's going on for them? Because as it's one thing to stumble across it, but it's a whole different thing to be seeking it out. And if we're seeking it out, is there something missing in this child's life that we really need to attend to?
Absolutely. I think this is a two-part answer. So I will answer once and I will do my best to come back to the second part. But I think really understanding the concept of addiction is probably the most important part in this. It's a not super well understood concept. I think we're getting better at it as a society. There's a really good study, and if you haven't seen it, I would hope most people are aware of it. If you haven't, go look it up, go learn about it. It's called Rat Park. Have you heard of this?
So good. Yeah.
Yes. All right. And so the concept, for those of you who haven't seen it, those of our listeners, is that these researchers, they took a rat and they put it in a cage by itself. They put 2 bottles of water on the side of the cage. One of those bottles, good, clean, normal water. The other bottle, water laced with cocaine. Okay, we got these 2 bottles, right? Rat in a cage by itself. What do you like? Naturally, what do you think? Which bottle is that rat going to choose?
Probably the one laced with cocaine.
Yep. Yeah, they would choose the cocaine water, right? The addiction develops, right? So the researchers, they go and they repeat this experiment, except this time, same setup with the cage, same bottles of water, one normal, one with cocaine. This time they put some toys and a bunch of other rats in the cage. What happens differently, Lindsay, you know?
I do know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't reach for the cocaine water anymore.
Yeah.
They actually went for the regular water.
And interestingly, sometimes they would sip from the cocaine water, but they didn't develop an addiction to it. And ultimately, they just I don't need this. And they just go to the normal water, right? So what that tells us is the presence of cocaine water. And if we substitute that with pornography, right? The presence of pornography is not what incites addiction. Right. It's
so important.
It's the lack of connection.
Lack of connection. In fact, I was just talking to a youth group about that yesterday and saying it's the opposite of addiction. What is it? And immediately people think sobriety, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, not acting out, not viewing pornography in this case. But what is the opposite of addiction? What do we always say?
It's connection.
It's connection, right? It is connection. So looking at the child's life and saying, what is missing? What is actually really going on here? And again, maybe the behavior is pornography. Maybe it's something else. But underneath that is we've got something else going on. Like I like to think of it like a glacier. And on the top of the glacier is the behavior. We're saying, okay, that is what we're seeing. We're seeing the child viewing pornography, right? Or the teen. But underneath it, what is really going on? And is it lack of connection? Is it self-esteem? Is it worth issues? What is going on underneath that we really need to get to the bottom of?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's understanding. I've heard it said that, that the addictive behavior is not the problem. It's the solution. And that's the problem.
Oh, that's
right?
So good.
And so we need
Say that one more time.
So the addictive behavior is not the problem. It's the solution.
It's what they feel like is a solution, right?
To a problem.
Yes.
Right? And that is the problem, that we're taking that behavior and we're making it a solution, right?
Yes.
And so ultimately, might sound kind of weird because we hear about copings a lot as very positive things. Pornography use is it is just a coping when it comes down to it, right? It's not a healthy one,
right?
Per se, right? What if we could find some other ones to replace that to make a more fulfilling life, right? What if we weren't spending 5 hours a week on a screen watching pornography? What if we were going and playing basketball?
Yes.
What if we're hanging out with friends, right?
I actually love that you talked about it because the clients that I work with that are working on a pornography addiction and trying to get out of it, I will often say that to them. Like, you can't just take this dopamine hit away. Pornography becomes a dopamine hit, right? And not replace it with anything. We've got to do something for those 5 hours to replace it, to actually go, our brain has those feel-good chemicals, but we're not just getting them from a source that is not helping us, right?
Yep.
And as you said that, it really made me think, gosh, what are we meant to do? We try to regulate our nervous system, our bodies. That's what we do. And sometimes we find adaptive ways to do them that really serve us. And sometimes we find maladaptive ways to do it. And that's what pornography is, right? And so I think to take the stigma out of it a little bit, that's helpful. That's helpful to hear. I would imagine just that, you know what, this is a coping mechanism. It's not a healthy one, but it's your body and your mind trying to regulate itself and to get back to a place of feeling more regulated. So let's find some other coping mechanisms that help us do that.
Oh yeah, I think as my from my perspective as a therapist, my job isn't to fix anyone, right? I don't think anyone's actually broken. I don't think people are broken. I think they get stuck sometimes. They don't break. My job is just to make life fun again. Let's help you figure out how to make life fun again. And if we do that, right, things work themselves out.
Isn't that true? Yep. But getting some clarity about that, right? Like, let's make life fun again. Gosh, that feels like for a kid to come into therapy and hear, let's make life fun again versus you're broken, let's fix you. That's such a different perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
And when the parent gets on board with that,
yes,
imagine how much better that is, right?
So much better.
Because otherwise we're using what I call the white knuckle approach, which is I'm just going to, flip that light switch off and I'm not going to be a sexual being. I'm not going to have sexual feelings, right? That works for a few months, maybe. Like, maybe on the rare occasion you get someone that's like, yeah, I went 6 months without looking at pornography. I just white knuckle the whole time. But nothing is ever changing. We're just stuck in that, right? But if you make life better, you make life fun, you make life something different than what it's been before, that's, it becomes less about the addiction and more about the person's happiness.
Yes. And I also think that's where you're getting to the bottom of things. You're getting like, okay, it's not about just stopping the behavior. We're actually going to figure out, what are you missing in your life?
Yes.
What's going on for you? Let's get clear on that and really get to the root of it, right? We're not just getting to the top of the iceberg. We're actually getting underneath and saying, let's get to the root of this. So that feels so hopeful. So when do you think that it is important for parents to seek help?
Yeah, this is a really good question because I get asked a lot. So if you have a child that's that is viewing pornography, like we've talked about, we use that team approach. Let's do this together, right? You're not a deviant. Let's figure this out. Let's get on the same page. I think there is a risk, right? If we do this in a way that suppresses, sexual, that sexuality, right? That if that child feels like they have to hide it and push it down and cover up and lie, right? The reason they're doing that is because there's so much shame involved, right? So when those things start to happen, right, when there's so much lying and shame, and there's just an inability, it feels like, to talk about it because it's such a dark thing, taboo thing that I don't want to touch and talk about, you can get into some water that I think can be really harmful, right? So pornography use in itself obviously has some things that are, maybe not super healthy about it, right? Maybe, ethically definitely questionable. But hiding it and not talking about it, you can get into some dangerous things, right? Like you're sending, formerly known as sexting, right? Like sending nude pictures. You get on TikTok, like for Snapchat, I guess, and you're having, conversations back and forth. Oh, we're running into some legal issues, right?
Yes.
So obviously we're going to be careful with that, but I'd say the second we kind of stray into more dangerous behavior, dangerous activities, that's when I start to look at, like maybe we start to think about getting more help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I also think, the opposite is true. How do we, as, parents and caregivers, how do we maybe get on top of it before it's a problem? Is it even possible? Can we, it feels sometimes like, okay, the internet is here, kids have devices. Is this just going to be inevitable, or how do we get on top of it? Is there anything proactive parents can do as well?
Learn to talk, right? Have open dialogue. If your child views you as a person to go to as support, no matter what comes up, right, you're going to be that safe person for them.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's all about connection, creating a relationship that you can connect with your child in, no matter what they do, right? No matter what happens.
Totally.
It's that unconditional love. If they know they can come to you, that's going to make the world a difference.
Yeah. It goes back to the relationship and connection, right? If there's connection between the parent and child, you're far more likely to have an open dialogue if the child sees it or if it becomes a problem, right? And then to know how to be their teammate alongside. And so I keep thinking the pornography usage is really a symptom of something bigger going on, right? And also the relationship and the connection is really the cure. And I'm not saying the filters, like all those things are really valuable. However, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is connection and relationship is really what is at the heart of this.
Yeah. Let your kid know, I love you. I'm here for you. Let's figure this out.
And no matter what, you love them. Yeah. No matter what they've done, you're there for them.
Yeah, because they're feeling, if something comes up, if they've made a mistake, that maybe it could be a really out there thing, or maybe it's kind of simple, but they're feeling terrible, right? If they're brave enough to come to you and tell you that says a lot about your relationships with them, right?
So true.
So foster that environment, and your child is going to love you for forever, and they're going to know you're their person.
Yeah, you're on their team, no matter what, all day long, every day on their team. It's a big deal. This is really beneficial, Blake. I really appreciated this conversation, and I think it will be really valuable for a lot of parents because I do think there's such fear around it for parents. And again, I think the accessibility for a lot of parents, it was so different than it is now. And so it is so scary, and trying to understand, it's almost like, it's just pervasive, and we know it's it's everywhere. But getting really clear about what we can do, because sometimes I think it feels like, oh, we're powerless. What can you do as a parent? But here's the thing, you can actually do so much. It's relationship, it's connection, it's having that team player mentality that makes such a difference. So Blake, is there anything that you've wanted to talk about that we haven't hit on before we wrap up?
There's so many things we could talk about. I'd say one important thing to kind of just know is that, we've talked about the category of kids that are more likely to feel really guilty and, to want to make changes. I think that's kind of been one of the focus, to want to not use pornography. Sometimes you do run into situations where this is pretty common too, where you have a child that maybe when confronted on it, they say, when they come to therapy, maybe I don't care so much about it, right? Maybe it's not a big deal to me, which in itself can be an entirely different thing. But at the bottom of it, it's the same answer, right? It's understanding that I love you, I'm here for you, let's have some conversations, right? If that person's in that office with me as a therapist and they tell me, hey, I actually don't care to change my habits, first thing I'm going to do is, okay, let's talk to your parents and let's get on the same page about it, right? So for a parent, there could be a lot of different, scenarios, but just at the end of the day, understanding that it's about connection, that your love for your child is more important than whatever happens.
Okay, I've got a question about that, though.
Absolutely.
If you have a kid that says, I actually don't think it's a problem, and you have a parent that says it is absolutely a problem, unacceptable, like, how do you bridge that gap, right? And do you say, well, the kid, he may not know that it is, how detrimental this can be? I mean, that feels like a big chasm. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's learning to have those discussions. Let them know you really care about them, because we want to create an environment where they can be open and not push things down and not hide them. And chances are there's going to be some situations where you really don't agree on things. That's okay. Sometimes as a parent, you got to say, well, I feel uncomfortable with that. I'm not okay with you looking at pornography, right? I can't control how you feel about it, but we do need to make some restrictions there. That's okay. You set some boundaries as a parent, right? As long as we understand that doesn't have to destroy your relationship, right? That doesn't have to change every aspect of it. It's just something that you disagree on, right? So it's having those discussions.
Good. I love that. Going back to discussions, right? Talk, be open. It's not the Super Bowl. I love that. Like, it's a normal game. We're going out for a rec game on a Tuesday night. That's what we're doing. We're having a discussion just like we would any other night. So really great. So just as a recap, I loved a couple of the things that we talked about. I loved the idea of calming yourself down as a parent first, taking a breath, regulating yourself, really getting clear that, oh gosh, this feels scary, and recognizing the difference between your child being the one that's making you feel that way, but the behavior is actually what's causing the fear inside of you, right? Yeah. I also love the idea of being a teammate, like that you're their teammate, you're with them, that you are going to be consistent with this. The clarity that connection is key. Like, we have got to be connected to our child to have any lasting change, and to recognize that this is a coping mechanism, not a healthy one, but a coping mechanism, and getting really clear about that.
Your child's not a deviant. Yeah.
No.
And you're doing great. You're probably doing much better than you think you are.
Gosh, I think that is so important, because I think parents take this so personally. Like, what have I done? What didn't I teach them? What did I allow them to look at? What filter did I not put in place? But to say, you know what, they're okay and you're okay, right? That reminder, I think that's so important. I think it's really important to remember that if parents are in this situation, that they're not alone, that this happens often, and it's something that so many people are dealing with, right? Again, the reminder is how you show up, and recognizing that these kids are navigating this as well for the first time, and you may be navigating it for the first time as well, and to have grace for yourself, grace for them as well, and to recognize that there is help out there. We are grateful, Blake, for you to be with us today. Thank you for your insights, really valuable information. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I hope you can share this with somebody, recognizing that this is something that is happening a lot, whether it's talked about or not. So if there's anyone that you think that one of your loved ones or a family member that could use this, please share this with them. And as always, feel free to ask us your questions on the Therapist Question Box. We are here to answer your tough questions. And until next time, take care.